Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation. I'm Scott Jorgens from Endeavour Solutions. We also have our sub-brand GP Support North. Between me, myself, and I, we're all here. And today's presentation is on AP automation. And with AP automation comes purchase order expenses and payments. And our great friends at Beanworks, now Quadient Accounts Payable, by Beanworks. As mentioned, I'm Scott, and I'll be transitioning the presentation over to Selena, and she'll do continued introductions momentarily. So this is what the main Beanworks interface looks like. Everything is all together in one unified platform, solving and using common workflow elements, user interface, and you can extend this out to your entire business community. Unlimited users. So it really helps to have unlimited users, AP processing, purchase requisitions and purchase orders, expense submissions, and then those individual components just count on sort of as pay as you go as the number of invoices or submissions that are submitted. Selena will get into this as part of her demo. In our opinion, so Endeavour and GP Support North, we're big fans of Beanworks. We've worked with a number of AP automation companies, expense management firms, time and expense, document management, and we found that there's very strong solutions out in the marketplace. Beanworks captures, let's say, an 80-20 rule, 80% of all your transactions, but it's really going to be a lot less investment for implementation, for ongoing support, and bringing everything together in a unified fashion. Beanworks is really ahead of the curve for many of the others that are out in the marketplace. Another 3-5 years from now, I think they're going to have some stiff competition. But for now, and for those on the line, we highly recommend what we're going to see today with Beanworks and Quadient. Some of their keys to success, they have a large history with that competitor product, but really have accelerated much of the development. Beanworks was acquired by Quadient and now is part of that Quadient larger ecosystem. And that really brings a lot of new business models and new business processes being for the cloud. So with cloud subscriptions, it's a subscription-based model, easy to get in. And no longer do we need to purchase $20,000 in software and then ongoing annual renewals. Really, that price has come down where it's highly affordable. And then you have that user-based consumption fee on the number of invoices that you do per month for AP automation. And every expense submission essentially just counts as one extra invoice. Same with purchase orders, and purchase requisitions are free because they result in eventually an invoice to pay for that purchase order. There is a sister company called YayPay, and that has a lot of the payment automation and even goes into collections management, both for Dynamics GP and for Business Central. The integration with GP is a little bit tighter, but there's this very strong roadmap for Business Central as well. Invoice and AP automation falls into Business Central. The purchase orders, for purchase orders created within Business Central, that's on a roadmap, and I think we're about a half a year away from that. So what is AP automation? We have invoices that we want to be able to get into Microsoft Dynamics. We have online purchase requisitions we want to have in sort of a portal approach to our larger user community. We have mobile expenses using phones, using laptops, submitting stuff, and really replacing that sort of traditional Excel spreadsheet submissions. And then there's also the payments. So OCR technology, we can read all of that, put it into Microsoft Dynamics, document management to store every single invoice up in the cloud and have a link in either GP or in Business Central to find that invoice instantly and not have to worry about all your online storage. Purchase order matching, as I mentioned, all the expenses and expense receipts, and all the approvals workflow that works for I want an invoice approved. I want a purchase order approved. I want employee expense statement approved. You have that common interface for your user community where, again, they can be accessing it on phones, on all their various devices. Approvals routing, as I mentioned, And then ultimately there's the electronic payments if you want to go to that extra step and have all the invoices and expense statements payment on your behalf. That the consistent user experience, I think, is really key in pulling all these pieces together in a unified platform. And when we talk about pricing later on, we'll go a little bit deeper on those components. Quadient, we used to have a previous slide here. They keep winning many awards. Very happy clients, and that aligns nicely with Endeavour and GP Support Norris and our focus on client satisfaction, client retention. And as they keep continuing to evolve and work with clients, work with a larger and larger client base, they keep winning a number of great awards, and we're happy to see that. So with that in mind, I'm going to transition over to Selena. Selena, I'm going to make you a presenter, and then you can start sharing your screen.
Perfect. So yeah, welcome everybody to our webinar today. It's called Ending the Paper Chase in Accounts Payable. Like Scott said, I'm Selena, your host for today's webinar, one of the channel development managers here at Quadient AP Automation, formerly known as Beanworks. And I do work with partners every day to understand their clients' AP workflows. And together we make a path using automation to meet their goals of reducing time spent on manual tasks, so that way they can focus on other high value things in their day-to-day. So for today, we're going to discuss the risks and challenges of relying on paper in AP and what you need in order to optimize your financial health. And we'll finish with a product demo and a Q&A session today. So as we go through this entire meeting, please feel free to use the Q&A function on your screens at any time, and then we'll answer all of those at the very end. Traditionally, accounts payable has been a paper-heavy process, and the use of paper invoices and checks has always been the standard. Even as automation grows in popularity, payments with paper checks still make up about 40% of all transactions. The problem is that paper is messy and it carries a significant number of liabilities, but they can also be impossible to access if teams are working remotely, and they also typically have to leave organizations now because they're vulnerable to fraud. So now, before we take a closer look at the risks of paper, I'd like to get a better understanding of how many invoices teams are processing right now for everybody that's attending today. So I'm going to send out a quick poll. Give everybody a couple of seconds to fill that out. We'll share the results, and then we'll move on from here. All right, so here are the results from the poll. So it looks like 50%, so that's half of everyone that's attending today, around 151 to 300. And then we have 76, 150, 301 to 500 coming in number 2, and then 10% in the 500 plus range. That's awesome, everybody. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so now the simple fact of the matter is that physical documents get lost. The Association for Intelligent Information Management states that 7.5% of documents get lost and another 3% are misfiled. So that means that 1 in 10 documents are either completely inaccessible or will require an extensive amount of time to track down. So just how much time is wasted? Now, according to the Economic Times, employees waste as much as 35% of their time hunting down the information needed to do their job. Now, if hunting for records isn't time-consuming enough, relying on paper invoices, checks, and expense reports also creates tedious data entry. Now, it's boring and frankly error-prone. Surveys have found that 76% of office workers spend up to 3 hours a day on data entry. In accounts payable, it's particularly easy for time spent on the process to balloon, as employees must enter data into multiple systems. The prospect of data entry errors exacerbates the problem. When dealing with paper, it's quite easy for invoices to wind up lost in the approval process. This issue has been complicated by the number of teams working remote or hybrid schedules. And this was one of the biggest challenges Elemental Energy faced. And according to their controller, Tanya, she indicated that approvals went through a mix of information channels based on department needs. The payments over a certain threshold required the CEO sign off, and follow-ups were conducted through email, but the process could be laborious if the approver requested backup records. Now, automation, on the other hand, allow for approvals to immediately route to the right person, creating a digital paper trail and ensuring no documents get lost in the mix. Of course, when you talk about drowning in paper processes, it's impossible to ignore the financial cost as well. A rough way to estimate the cost of manually processing an invoice is to consider the cost of 30 minutes of labor from an AP employee. And in general, this will range from $12 to $35. The price of manually processing paper checks is equally steep. A single check can cost between $4 to $20, and it's estimated that businesses in the United States spend almost $160 billion sending and receiving paper payments. Now, with the nature of the modern workspace changing, reliance on paper has gone from impractical and inconvenient to an impediment, hindering the team's ability to function. With so many organizations continuing to embrace remote and hybrid work, it's important to ask, how has this impacted the accounts payable process? For teams relying on paper processes, employees working remote lack access to the physical files that they need to perform their job, and there can be a lack of visibility due to siloed systems. So without proper integrations, data stored in one system is not accessible from another, and it may completely be inaccessible to employees working out of office. Now, adopting automation helps eliminate both these concerns. And because data is centralized on the cloud, it can be accessed from any location at any time. And a good automation software will also integrate with things like your accounting system, meaning that all the information you need will be readily available. So an automation system also allows you to set up custom approval workflows. Invoices are immediately sent to the appropriate approver, and regular reminders are then issued until the invoice has been paid off. So this reduces the amount of time that employees are left waiting. The Association for Institutional Research, or AIR, is a great example of an organization that was well prepared for the shift to remote work. They had already started digitizing their processes before the pandemic hit in 2020. And their director of finance, Charlie, told us we had been preparing for the pandemic without knowing it. Going with Quadient AP automation made things a million times easier. People can send documents around within the system or check them and kick them back if needed. It's very manageable for a small accounting team that we have. Since that conversation, AIR has completed their shift to being a fully remote organization and just recently closed on the scale of their former office in Tallahassee, Florida. Now we're going to turn our attention to fraud and how reliance on paper-based practices leave you vulnerable to it. Now, fraud has always been a concern for financial departments, but during times of crisis and uncertainty, it becomes especially difficult. As organizations adopt a new way of operating, scammers are better able to spot weak spots to take advantage of. And that's one of the reasons occupational fraud rose 90% in the first year of the pandemic. And while the pandemic may not be the crisis it was 2 years ago, economic uncertainty is starting to fill the void. People are nervous as a potential recession looms, which makes it as important as ever to have full visibility in your AP process. 71% of finance professionals state that lack of visibility into the AP process left their company vulnerable to fraud. This lack of visibility is tied directly to the increase in remote and hybrid work environments while still relying on old-fashioned AP processes. So we spoke to a business called Hearn International about how automation helped them combat financial fraud. So their finance accountant, Derek, says, we received an invoice that was completely fraudulent, but looked like an invoice that we normally receive. It was uploaded to Quadient AP automation and routed to the approver, and they instantly rejected it as a fraudulent invoice. So this is a great example of automation providing safeguards against fraud. The software allows you to set up an approval matrix, setting parameters that can require multiple managers to approve invoices over a certain amount. You can also separate duties so that the person who approves an invoice is not the same person who distributes the funds. So now, how can you mitigate the risk? So firstly, we recommend to have at least 2 levels of approval. Next, by separating roles for approvals and payments, you can reduce your chances for funds to be rerouted or otherwise misappropriated. Thirdly, we have delegation of authority, and this applies primarily to determining who should have the authority for specified spending limits within certain categories of expenditure. Security awareness training, that's very important. So this means training your team to recognize and handle different types of attacks, including BEC, phishing, and spam campaigns. Warn your staff about these scams and give them a central in-house contact where they can verify requests they may have received. And lastly, adopt multi-factor authentication for important processes, such as recovering email accounts and wire transfer payments. Many companies are under the impression that their paper-based policies provide a strong internal control. But in reality, the increased sophistication of scammers and opportunities for human error make it much more difficult to minimize the risk of loss without the aid of technology. AP automation can greatly improve your risk management capabilities through improved visibility, tracking, and controlling invoice and payment processes. Multiple online approval channels create accountability and allow for verification of vendors and detection of suspicious invoices. It also flags duplicate invoices and payments. And an automated solution also restricts paying unapproved invoices until the approval process is completed. So that way, CFOs, they have a tighter control of who approves invoices and when payments are made. That way, they can manage risk and financial loss to the company at a broader level. All right, so now I'm going to walk you through how to perform a health check on your accounting practices and the key questions that you should be asking. We're going to look at 3 areas. First one is workflows, approval processes, and then fraud controls. And the questions that you should be asking to assess how strong your accounting practices are and identify potential issues. Now, when assessing your workflows, you should be asking yourself the following questions. First, how many staff are dedicated to AP functions? So what percent of their day is spent on data entry, processing invoices, payments, expense management? Next, how many invoices are processed monthly per full-time equivalent? And then how much does it cost to process an invoice? Now, into the next step here for the approval process, research has found that following up on invoices that haven't been approved on time is a lengthy process that can take up to 20% of a typical AP clerk's time. Now, when reviewing the approval process for your AP workflows, you should ask yourselves how many full-time employees manage this approval process, how long does it take for approvers to approve an invoice, and how much time is spent managing the approvals weekly, monthly, and annually. This way, it will help you identify any bottlenecks in areas that you might find need to be improved. And finally, fraud controls. As mentioned earlier, we've seen an increase in fraud since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, regularly reviewing your fraud controls is essential. So here's some questions you can ask yourselves. So first, do you run security awareness training for employees? Do you have a process if vendors wish to change their banking information? And then finally, how do you stay up to date with the best practices? The scammers are becoming increasingly sophisticated, so it's important that you have a way to stay up to date on the latest scams. That way you can inform your team and update your controls. Now that covers it for our webinar today. And of course, as you see on the screen, we're going to be doing a quick demonstration of Quadient AP. So I'm going to be making a quick switcheroo into my demo instance. Now, do keep in mind, since we are doing our webinar today, we'll only be covering the invoice and purchase order modules. So if you are interested in checking out payments and expenses, definitely take that information at the very end of this webinar, and we'll be happy to set up a more detailed call with the rest of your team so you can look into what exactly you're looking for. So hopping into the system here, what you're seeing on the screen is Quadient AP automation powered by Beanworks. Now, before we jump into the details of the modules, I'll quickly do a review of the user access. So that way, as we click through, we'll all be on the same page with what's going on. So on the left, we have our 4 modules. There's expenses. This is where you can have your employees go in. They can upload an unlimited amount of receipts. There's no limit because there are unlimited users in the system as well. You can have all of your employees onboarded to use the system. And we have purchase orders. So this is where we can either create purchase orders or import them directly from the financial system. We'll hop into that in more detail later. The invoices, that's the star of our show. It's kind of, I like to say, the Beyonce of the 4 modules. Everybody goes into the system, has access to invoices. And then finally, payments. This is where we can send payments out directly to your vendors for you. Now, all the way at the very top, this is where the life of an invoice is broken out. So invoices will begin in either create or in progress, graduate down until it hits archived. In the center is the workspace. Then over here, we have the organizational structure. So the great thing about Quadient AP is we can work with single entity environments or multi-entity environments. You'll be able to break it out based on your company. So over here at the top, I have my parent company, and then each of those legal entities directly below, and then it's further broken out by the respected department. Now, like I mentioned before, we do allow for unlimited users, so you can have as many people as you'd like go into the system. Because there's so many people, you probably want to have some restrictions as well for who can see what, which is definitely what we can provide. So for example, let's say we have an employee that works in HR. When they log in, they'll only see invoices related to their department. But of course, everybody involved in accounting and finance will be able to see everything that's going on in the company. Now, this level of restriction will also apply for the modules and the tabs. So let's say you have team members that are only going to be submitting expenses. When they log in, they'll only see the expense module. And then for a lot of the approvers, all they got to do is press a button in here. So when they come in, they'll see the approvals tab. We can hide the other 4 from them, so you only have to see what applies to you. But that essentially covers it for the user access. Now, hopping into the first module, which is purchase orders, there are 2 ways that we can handle purchase orders here in Quadient AP. Now, the first way is to create them directly in our software. And the second way is to just import them directly from your financial system, so either Business Central, Dynamics, into our system here. But starting off at creating them in our software, everything will always start in the Create tab. Now in here, you can select the legal entity this is going to be created for. And now keep in mind, if you do have one legal entity, this is always going to be defaulted for you. Now from here, employees can select the vendor that they want to purchase from, enter in the dates, and then all the totals down here at the bottom right. At this step, employees can also enter in other fields that they typically have for their purchase orders. Typically, they'll have the account, sometimes the class, anything else. Now, do keep in mind, for employees that may not have the accounting experience that are creating these purchase orders, sometimes they don't know which account, and that's totally cool. So in those cases, what we can do is leave a field blank and then route this to someone else in the organization who can then fill in that information for them. But on the other hand, let's say they do know, that's perfect. What they can do is double click, and they'll have access to the accounts that are directly pulled over from your financial system here into Beanworks. Then once everything looks good, you can either hit save or submit for approval. Now, when I hit save, this will turn the purchase requisition here in progress, which is basically where you'll find all of your edits before approval. So if I hop into one, for example, here, you'll see an image that's automatically generated, the information that the employee has entered. And you know what? Maybe I want to purchase more things today. So I'm going to add more line items, make any of those changes before fully submitting it for approval. Now, upon approval, this will then push into the next step, which will go into the approvers box. Now, for building out the approvals, you can build them out based on whatever criteria you'd like, and we'll hop into how to build those out later on in the invoice module. But essentially, from the approver's perspective, they'll receive a daily email notification. It's going to tell them that they have approvals ready for their purchase orders. And then when they come in here, they can double click. They'll see all the information entered, and then you can give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Now, when rejection happens, you will have to leave a comment that is mandatory because we want to make sure when this goes back to the person creating the purchase order, they'll know what needs to be changed. That way this can be approved the next time. But let's say we're looking at this, it looks awesome. We're going to give it a thumbs up. That will then push this into the committed tab where you'll see all of your approved and open purchase orders. Now, at this step, if we are going to be importing the purchase orders from the financial system into Beanworks, they'll also show up here in the committed tab. So this is the relation that connects if you're creating it in Beanworks or if you're pulling it over from the financial system. So now in here, all those purchase orders, they're basically waiting for the invoice to come in from the vendor. And later on in the invoice module, I'll show what it looks like when it matches. Once it's matched up, close out the PO. That will then push all the information here in the close tab, which is basically like your filing cabinet. So let's say you have to pull up historical information later. You can always hop into this tab to find that information. But that essentially covers it for the purchase orders. And now again, if there are any questions, please feel free to throw it into the Q&A chat box. We'll answer those at the very end. But with that said, I'm going to hop into the last module for today's demo, which will be invoices. So here are the invoices. The first thing we'll cover will be getting them into Quadient AP. Now there's 3 ways we can do this based on how they're received. Now, the long-term goal for using any system that does automation for you guys is to get everything in electronically. Now, the reason for that is the invoices that come in, they'll just completely skip the create step, which is typically saved for paper ones, and directly show up here in progress automatically. We do pull it over from your email. So that way you don't have to worry about getting them in. It'll all show up here in progress and then move into immediate processing where the computer will start to scrape the information off the invoices. That's for the emailed copies. Now, for any paper copies, we have 2 ways. So the first way is taking a picture of it with our mobile app, which will also load it here in progress. Now, the third and final way will be through the create step here. Now, here in create, you can hit upload, drag and drop a batch of scanned paper invoices. And then once you hit the upload button, you'll see an example that looks like this 3-page invoice on the screen. So right now, because it's in one file, we're assuming it's in one invoice. But let's say you have multiple in here. What you can do, super simple, hit the split button, let them split out. And then if there are invoices with multiple pages, you can always rearrange. So that way now I have a 2-page invoice and then a 1-page invoice. And once that looks good, hit save create, which will then push all those paper copies to meet with the electronic copies here in progress. So once the invoice is in the system, we want to start to tag the information. So our computer will read the header information, bringing in the vendor, the invoice number, the dates, subtotals, totals, and taxes. So all you got to do at this point is allocate the rest of the line item details. Now to do this part, we have 2 ways. The first way is with one of our new features. It's called line item capture, where we use OCR to read line items. All you got to do is populate the information down here. Now the second way is that there's a PO matched to the invoice. So typically, up to this step, computer's going to look at the invoice. It's going to see, hey, there's a PO number. We're going to match it to a PO. And then usually you'll be able to pull up that purchase order here on the right and then bring in those line items from the purchase order into the invoice. So that way it fills in all the details down here for you guys as well. So there's the two ways. And the final way is repeating invoices that are coming in. So let's say you have utility bills, anything like that is typically going to be coded the same. With the computer here, the first time you enter the information like the account, anything else, next time the invoice comes in, it'll just automatically populate all the information for you. So that way all you have to do is make sure it's done correctly before hitting save or submit for approval. Now, once we submit this for approval, this will then push into the next step, which is approvals. Now, like I mentioned before, for building out the approvals, you can build them based on whatever criteria. All of that is going to be done in the settings. Now here in the settings, you can create approvals for all 4 of our modules. In this example, I'm going to hop into invoices. Now from here, you can select the legal entity you would want to create this approval channel for. And then from here, we can start to build the channel together. So at the very top, we can give this channel a name. So for this example, I'll do a more complicated approval channel. Let's do it based on the vendor, dollar amount, and department. Over here, you can also set an amount, so either a minimum, maximum, or a range. And then all the way at the very bottom, this is where you'll find your lists pulled over from your financial system into Quadient AP. So right now I am working out of a demo instance. So at this moment, I do only have the department list. So let me take out vendor real quick, hit save. Now there's a visual of what this approval channel is going to look like. So this means any invoice coming in above $1,000 for the finance department will then be routed to my approvers determined over here. Now on the left, we have all the users in the system that are approvers. And then on the right, we have the selected approvers. So I'm going to go ahead and select 3 people for this channel, bringing them over. And now because it's in order, it's going to go to Anne first, then to Brandon, and then finally to Colin. Now you can always rearrange the order if you need to. And in some cases, maybe you have some people with the same level of authorization. All we can do is drop them into a group. So this means Anne, Brandon, whoever gets the invoice first can approve it. But that's essentially how we can build out those approvals in the back end. Again, you can make them as simple or complex, and there's no limit on how many you can make. But hopping back into the approvers experience now, they'll receive a daily email notification. Once again, it's going to tell them that, hey, you got invoices in your queue. Now from there, they can either go on their phone, we do have an app, or the web browser version here where they can open one up and then approve or reject from this screen. Now, once again, if you remember this from purchase orders, when rejection happens, you gotta leave a comment. But if everything looks good and we hit approved, that will then push all the invoices here in the export step. Now here in export, this is where you'll see all your approved invoices. Now you want to get it back into your financial system. Over here at the top, hit Actions, Export Data, and this will send all of those approved invoices back into your financial system and basically look like you've manually entered everything on your own. And then once that happens, all the information will waterfall into the archive tab. It's the same as closed. This is your filing cabinet. So instead of filing away in paper, cabinets, storage, anything like that, all that's going to move here into the archive tab if you do ever have to pull up historical information. Now, in terms of searchability, a lot of teams that we work with like to use the custom filters here on the left, and you can pretty much build it based on whatever you'd like. So you can do it by amount, you can do it by due date, whatever you'd like, set it up, hit search, or maybe you want to see something quick. So global search is very handy for that. You can think of this like Google search. So let's say, today I want to see all my invoices from Amazon. Just type that in, and then the system will filter it all for me over here. Now, finally, in terms of reporting. Audit season's coming around, year end. Maybe you got to pull up some invoices. How are we going to do that? So here in Quadient AP, all you got to do is download either a CSV or PDF once you've selected the sample of invoices that you want to see. Now, when I hit the download button, open up this report. On the first page of this, you're always going to get a summary of the invoices with a grand total here at the very bottom. But on the other hand, let's say you want to see some more details, feel free to click on the blue hyperlinks here to the left, which will take you to the image of the invoice, along with the header information, the line items, and the approval history. So that way, when audit season comes around or year end, you can just pull up this information. A lot of the teams that we work with actually like to add their auditors as read-only users, since we do allow for unlimited access. That way they can hop in here, download what they need. They don't have to bug the accounting team. I know working with other clients, audit season is a little bit crazy. So this makes it a little bit easier on the accounting team. That way they can focus on other things during that time as well. But that is pretty much the entire system that we're going to be covering today. Now, again, if you are looking to explore the payments or the expenses, or there are specific questions you guys don't actually want to go over, definitely take down our information. We can set up that conversation at a later time.
Thanks, Selena.
Thank you. Over back to you, Scott.
Now we're going to talk briefly about pricing, and then I'll have to take some of this out of our demo or recording, I guess. So thanks for those that have stuck around or online. So we pull all those fees together, 1, 2, 3, 4, AP, PO, expense, and payments. All for implementation with Beanworks Quadient is in the $4,000 to $6,000 US, and that's the integration plus the setup. There's a lot of easy self-serve training. What you see on this screen here is their Smart Sync, either for GP or for Business Central, and they point to the different sections, choosing what components is being pushed. Is it payments? Is it invoices? Are we doing some sort of matching? And all those components are set up by their consultants who work easy with you. So here is the confidential pricing. So welcome back. We've taken out the pricing component from our recording. Those that are new to Endeavour and GP Support North, thank you. For those that are on the line who are current clients, thank you for your business for a number of years. We have a number of clients who have been with us for close to 30 years. We're in our 34th year of business advisory, implementation services, ongoing optimization and support. And our core values are very true to each of our consultants and how we do business. Working with integrity, building, earning, keeping, and maintaining the trust, and ultimately being accountable to not only the support side, but to your success when we're bringing in new implementations, upgrades, as well as new products such as Beanworks. Next steps, contact Trish, James, or Steve on our team, and they can connect you with others, as well as we can connect you with our friends at Quadient. So drum roll, we do have a special offer. Dun, 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 dun. I'll include this link in the follow-up to say thank you for attending today. We're offering a $50 Amazon gift card for those in Canada. There'll be Canadian funds, those in US funds. And this is compliments of Quadient. To qualify is really taking that next step, to raise your hand to say, yes, I want to see a deeper dive. Selena and team, show me some personalized demo around AP automation. Show me the expense management that we glazed over. Show me more of the purchase orders. Talk to me about what the integration points look like for Dynamics GP or for Business Central. So $50 can go a long way. Buy your team a lunch, get new coffee mugs and dishes for your kitchen. There's lots of great tech that you can buy online and be able to share that with your team, or keep it just within yourself and your finance peers. So let's set this back up to be any one of the questions. I'll go into the questions playing are into the chat. I see Kaylee has one. Does the system know what type of batch transactions are being processed once exported from GP? So Selena, this is sort of what are the tags that when the transaction goes back into GP, does it show which areas is it talking to?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So when we send the invoices back into GP, they're actually all unposted. So once it goes back, it's unposted. You guys can review the list and then post it in GP.
Okay, so that also answers part 2 of her question of yes, you can edit, you can choose which ones are going to post. If there's something that's not right, you can overwrite it. It's not completely taking out the intelligence of human touch.
Yeah, that's right. We still want the human in there for a little bit, you know?
Yeah. And when I started off talking about sort of that 80-20 rule, there are ways to even further automate. So you really are touching no one in finance, but the costs go up exponentially. And we found that the comfort level within most of our clients isn't at that level to automate to that degree. So why start with extreme complexity, moving something that's going to get the job done and really have a great return on investment?
100%. And a lot of the clients that we work with, because it's quite new, they typically like to start off with, just the invoices, maybe the purchase orders first, kind of dip your toes into the pool before jumping all the way in. And then we definitely have that flexibility later on to add payments and expenses. But we do work very closely with your team, checking in to see how you're doing, and then helping you, of course, adding on as needed. So yeah, really great for that as well.
Great. Okay. I think we're good. So as mentioned, reach out to Trish, James, or Steve. And then we also have our special next steps. I'll include that in the follow-up email.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Scott. Take care, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye.